Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about a fight that right now is fluid. It's in the heavyweight division. It's supposed to be an elimination contest. The winner is supposed to be in line for the winner of Vladimir Klitschko Tyson Fury. And it's a fight between Luis Ortiz and Alexander Ustinov. Now, I need to have everyone understand that when you have a splintered title, when every other person at the mall seems to have a share of the heavyweight belt, right? These sanctioning bodies don't have the power to keep fighters fighting in these elimination contests. Guys like Luis Ortiz, who's unbeaten, know that if he doesn't follow instructions, if he wants to get out of line, as long as he's unbeaten and as long as media outlets want to show his fights, and as long as you have young guys with a share of the heavyweight title, right? Tyson Fury, Wilder, Joshua, Tom, Dick, Harry, right? Someone is going to want to give him a title shot. So for him to accept the match, the risk-reward has to be good for him, right? Either it's high risk, high reward, right? Or it's lower risk with a commensurate reward. Now, according to the rumors, Luis Ortiz isn't happy about this bout, right? Depending on who you believe, Luis Ortiz might be trying to find the off-ramp. This fight apparently was supposed to be on a big card, and already its status is in limbo. Right? There's talk of lawsuits. Let me just say, the reason for the hesitation is because this fight is better than advertised. Right? It's better than advertised. Now, today is August the 3rd, 2016. This analysis really only holds true for, let's say, the next 3 months. If these two men don't step into the ring within the next 3 months, then I want you to discard what I have to say here. Right? But if they do, here's how I see the fight. Luis Ortiz is excellent on the inside. Now that matters in a heavyweight division where, in my opinion, Deontay Wilder can't fight on the inside. Let's just be blunt. Right? He's not alone. Vladimir Klitschko can't fight on the inside. Well, Ortiz is excellent on the inside. In my opinion, he's a technician and relies more on skills, right? A knowledge of how to do things than on athleticism. Right? Quick reflexes, getting there first. This is a guy who's thought the whole thing through. He's one of the smarter guys in boxing, even though he calls himself the real King Kong. Right? Somebody has to sit down with this brother one of these days and talk to him about why that might be offensive in the United States. Right? He's Cuban. But let's say this. He's a master at feints. He's a southpaw. So that gives opponents different angles. He can hit you with both hands and can lead with an assortment of power shots. He can throw an uppercut with either hand. He has the balance. He's also a master of punch sequence, right? He's one of those guys who'll tuck a heavy uppercut in the middle of a combination. Right? He'll hide his real punch for the middle of the combination. But right? And this is a gambling site here. We talk about the positive. We also talk about the negative. In my opinion, Luis Ortiz has stamina problems. In part because, dare I say, he's not a great athlete. He doesn't move that well to me. He looks like he can be beaten by a better athlete on the outside. He reminds me a bit of Sonny Liston, right? Simply put, one of the more skilled heavyweights I've come across in looking at film, right? I think he'd have a problem against a faster, more mobile heavyweight like, let's say, a David Haye, right? And yes, I do expect David Haye to destroy Shannon Briggs. Now, Ustinov, who got destroyed. You want to see a car crash? Look at the Kubrat Pulev film. Not just the last round, but from start to finish. But Ustinov is mobile. Right? Make no mistake, I know he's big, I know he looks clunky, I know he's not well defined. Ustinov is one of the more nimble heavyweights in the division. In fact, forget how he looks. Right? Don't go off your first impression. Watch how he moves. This is a big man with some of the best legs in the heavyweight division. He's like Jackie Gleason. He's a big man who is very light on his feet. If you're into hip-hop back in the day, think Heavy D. Right? He can move. He's an athlete. Don't let your first impression looking at him fool you. Here's the problem with him. Now keep in mind, an athlete like him could give Ortiz problems in the later rounds. His problem is that boxing-wise, he's a bit limited. Right? This is a guy who's only lost to Kubrat Pulev. He doesn't have a good jab to score and win rounds from the outside. Right? So if he's going to beat Luis Ortiz, understand he can't come out like Ali, like Larry Holmes when Larry got up on his feet. Right? Look at Larry against Mike Tyson. Right? How that fight started. Right? Before the knockout caused all of us amnesia. Right? Ustinov can't do that. He can't come out and say, I'm going to hit you with the jab. You're not going to like it, but you're not going to be able to find me in the ring. You're going to be blinded by the jab. I don't even have to think about your skill level because you're not going to be close enough to me for that to become relevant. Right? Ustinov doesn't have the jab to do that. So what he's going to have to do, and it's against his nature, because this is a guy who thinks of himself, and that's very important in boxing, in my opinion. He thinks of himself as a hunter, a front foot guy, not as the hunted, a defensive guy who's going to make you miss and then make you pay with counters. Right? So, while Ustinov's real game is to come inside and hit you with right hands, right, against Luis Ortiz, in my opinion, he'd have to find a way not to do so for the early rounds. Because you come inside on Luis Ortiz when he's not winded, when he's alert early in a fight, you're begging for trouble. Right? So, what Ustinov would have to do is to just linger around the neighborhood of Ortiz for a few rounds. In other words, he would have to survive the early rounds, where in my opinion he'd be at a disadvantage against a more skilled opponent. Right? Ortiz has the advantage in the early rounds. In my opinion, if Ustinov can avoid being hit, right? If Ustinov can avoid those stamina sapping, punches to the ribcage, if Ustinov can avoid the jab he kept walking into against Kubrat Pulev, that had him in effect throw in the towel later, right? He goes down to a knee. Let's just say Buster Douglas looked more convincing on the canvas against Evander Holyfield than this guy looked on the canvas against Kubrat Pulev. Right? Ustinov needs to find a way to just hang out in the early rounds. Right? Trade a little bit, but then back away. Forget the alpha self-identity he has, and figure out that being beta at times against a guy who has diminishing stamina might pay off in the later rounds when you can be alpha and you're dealing with a guy who's huffing and puffing, who might be open to get hit with the right hands you really want to throw. So, the bet I'm recommending here is I like Ortiz to win. Now the casino is sharp. This bet might not be possible. You're going to have to read the odds on the fight and figure out if it is. But I like Ortiz to win. Hedged with Ustinov by KO. Ustinov hits hard, folks. Right? I just get the feeling that when you put an alpha guy like Ustinov in the ring, both of these guys are alpha, by the way, right? Ortiz shows up, he believes he's the best. He's trying to hunt you down, right? Ortiz does have the skills, though, because his stamina requires the skills to survive, right? Ortiz has been in enough fights where he's out of gas partway through the round, right? So Ortiz has learned how to survive the round, right? I just get the feeling that you put an alpha guy like Ustinov in the ring, and keep in mind, the guy's typically bigger than his opponent, right? You put a guy like this in the ring and you tell him, hey, you can't be the dom early. You're going to have to be the sub for a few rounds. Right? You're going to have to allow this guy, who's the superior talent when he's rested, to become unrested and sloppy. What I've found is that boxing's a sport of egos. That guy might enter the ring with that game plan. But if he gets hit, if he doesn't like the way his opponent looks at him right before the opening bell, if words are said and a guy is not, mentally tough, right? If a guy is too eager to please the crowd and he comes out and the crowd's thinking in terms of action every round, they're not thinking of a 12-round strategy, right? They see you lose the first round, they see you lose the second round, they think you're a loser. Some fighters can't handle that, right? Especially when they have the girlfriend sitting ringside. They have the kids, and I have no idea. I have no idea why fighters bring kids to fights, but they have the kids sitting ringside. They have Uncle Tony sitting ringside, right? Keep in mind, too, the trainer and the fighter could be on the same page. But you have investors who barely know jack about boxing. You have a manager who might as well be managing a musical act, right? All the manager knows is, hey, there's money involved in this contest, right? The manager rarely is a former fighter. Rarely. Right? So you have the fighter in the ring. There's a sense of panic among supporters. They see him lose the early rounds. They aren't thinking in terms of this being part of a bigger strategy. Right? The guy you're losing rounds to looks at you and says, F you, I told you, you don't belong on my level, whatever. Right? Says what he does or looks at you as if you're, inferior to him, and the game plan goes out the window. So, I'm not convinced Ustinov's going to be disciplined. Because I believe Ortiz is going to win the early rounds. And because I believe Ustinov's going to panic and is going to come inside, and because Ustinov doesn't have the jab to just stay outside, win rounds the easy way against an inferior athlete, I think Ortiz wins this fight. I will say this, though. Ustinov clearly has a shot at a KO. Right? His right hand is that good. And if Ortiz gets tired, understand that KO can come from outside of the ring. Right? If Ortiz senses that he has nothing left, right, then like Sonny Liston in the first fight against Ali, I wouldn't be surprised if between rounds he says, hey, my shoulder hurts. That's it for me. Right? Older fighters who know they aren't great athletes, who know that training camp was a biatch, right? Those guys will say, hey, I'm going to live for another day. Right? They'll know, look, I'm having a problem standing up in these later rounds. My opponent has better legs than I thought. He has some of the best legs in the heavyweight division. I'm not going to catch up to him, and I'm getting tired of getting hit with these right hands and tired of being embarrassed. So, to sum this all up, I like Ortiz to win, but I'm going to hedge the play with Ustinov by KO. That's how I see this one. Let's hope the fight goes off. Now, if you hear that Luis Ortiz, has decided not to have this fight, no need to panic. Right? For all we know, he's been talking behind the scenes with the camps of some of the other champs. Right? If he privately feels, man, I would spank Deontay Wilder. That would be an intriguing fight, by the way. Or, gee, what does Anthony Joshua have on the inside that would even threaten me? Then if their camps contacted him and said, hey, player, no need to fight anybody else. We've got you in our queue. Right? When our guy gets by this mandatory, we'll have a voluntary and we'll fight you because you're unbeaten. We're looking for credibility. Right? My young lion wants some older, out-of-shape lion who he feels doesn't have the stamina to match him in the later rounds. Then that'll be okay. Right? That'll be okay. But if there are lawsuits, if this fight doesn't happen, and people are upset and stuff like that, be careful. Right? Be careful. Because that might delay careers and cause problems. Anyway, you know how I see the fight. Let me hear from you. How do you see the fight? Understand, Alexander Ustinov has sparred with a lot of people. Right? This is a guy who, regardless of how he looks, is always in shape. Look up his history. In the past, he's been willing to take fights on short notice. Also, understand too, this is the heavyweight division. Let's apply Einstein's law of relativity to boxing. I'm just telling you that heavyweights age more slowly. Right? David Price, he's in his 30s. David Haye, he's in his 30s. Vladimir Klitschko, isn't he now in his 40s? Right? I know you have young champs and stuff, but understand some of these champs aren't as young as you think. Deontay Wilder's 30. right? Don't be thrown by the guy's ages. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments here in the comment section to this video. Let me know who you think wins. Let me know why. Tell me if you feel I'm being too hard in calling Luis Ortiz not the best athlete. If there are fights out there that you feel contradict that, where you feel he's showing a lot of stamina, right? Direct us to those fights. I thought Brian Jennings made a big mistake. A big mistake against Luis Ortiz. Fought the wrong fight. Right? Jennings is one of the heavyweight division's better athletes. Right? If Jennings fights the fight he fought against Vladimir Klitschko, goes the distance against Klitschko, how would Luis Ortiz have stayed up with him in the later rounds? We know Jennings could fight that fight. We saw him fight the fight against a guy with a big punch. Right? Jennings appears to have gotten his playbook confused. Brian, Vladimir Klitschko is the guy without the inside game, not Luis Ortiz. You don't fight Vladimir Klitschko from the outside. You fight Luis Ortiz from the outside. You don't come inside on Luis Ortiz. Anyway, hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.